Hello students, today we are going to discuss about Unit 1 Amplitude Modulation. The course outcome of first unit is distinguish various amplitude modulation communication systems in which generation and detection of AM modulated signals can be studied and their corresponding applications can be studied. Analog communication. So before enter into analog communication, what is communication? Communication is the process of conveying or transferring information from one point to another point. Information can be image, text, or any other data. Communication between any 2 points or places requires a medium in between them. This medium can be wired or wireless medium. The information that needs to be transmitted may not be in the form that is suitable for all medium. It needs to be processed. This processing of raw information to convert it to a form that is suitable for a medium is called as modulation. Then types of communication. Communication can be two types. One is analog and second one is digital. Analog communication. The transmission information is continuous in nature, whereas in digital communication it is discrete in nature. So this is the basic block diagram of communication system. First one is source, transmitter, transmission channel, receiver and destination. So these are all the 6 major blocks in communication systems, especially in analog communication. So the information from the source should be modulated before the transmission to enable proper transmission of information from transmitter to receiver. The process of modifying or changing characteristics of signal is called modulation. Any signal has 3 characteristics. They are amplitude, frequency and phase. What is the definition for modulation? The process of changing any one of these characteristics of high frequency carrier signal with respect to the information is known as modulation. So consider this example. So this is the low frequency signal, then this is the high frequency carrier signal. When both these are combined, we can able to send this letter from one point to the destination. So by combining these two is called as modulation, and after modulation the modulated signal is sent to the destination. It is a simple example. Then types of modulation. So modulation is classified as analog and digital. So in detail, analog communication can be further classified into 3 types. One is amplitude modulation, frequency modulation and phase modulation. Similarly, digital modulation can be classified into ASK, FSK, PSK and QAM. So what is amplitude modulation? So that is our first unit. So amplitude modulation is nothing but the process of changing characteristics of especially the amplitude of high frequency carrier signal in accordance with the low frequency input signal. Here the frequency and phase of carrier remains constant. What is FM? Frequency modulation. It is a process of changing the frequency of high frequency carrier signal in accordance with the amplitude of the information signal by keeping amplitude and phase of the carrier is constant. Similarly, we can define PM also. So phase modulation is the process of changing the phase of the high frequency carrier signal in accordance with the amplitude of modulating signal by keeping frequency and amplitude as constant. Why we go for modulation? So that is the first question. So in wireless communication, signals from various sources are transmitted through free space. So this causes interference among various signals and no useful information is received by the receiver. The problem of interference is solved by transmitting the message signal to different radio frequency spectrum. This is known as modulation. Without modulation, there are some disadvantages while transmission. One is large antenna height, short range of communication, signals get mixed up, multiplexing is not possible. So what is the need for modulation? reduce the height of antenna, transmit signal over a long distance, avoid noise and interference, multiplexing, and improve the signal to noise ratio. So how to reduce the height of antenna? So there is a relation between wavelength and frequency. So what is frequency? The number of cycles of a waveform per second is known as frequency, and the unit is hertz. Wavelength, distance between two points of similar cycles of a periodic wave is known as wavelength. So lambda is equal to c by f, where lambda is nothing but the wavelength of the signal, c is speed of the light, and f is the baseband signal frequency. So this frequency can be a baseband signal or a high frequency signal. So what is bandwidth? The frequency range through which information being transmitted is called as bandwidth. In other words, difference between high frequency signal to the low frequency signal is called as bandwidth. Then this is the table which represents frequency designation at the corresponding frequency range. For low frequency signal, the frequency range is 30 to 300 kHz. For medium frequency, it is 300 kHz to 3 MHz. High frequency signal 3 to 30 MHz. Very high frequency 30 to 300 MHz. Ultra high frequency 300 MHz to 3 GHz. High frequency, super high frequency 3 to 30 GHz. Extremely high frequency 30 to 30 GHz. So these are all the frequency ranges and their corresponding designation. So I already told there is a relation between the wavelength and the antenna height. So if the frequency is low, because these two are inversely proportional. So if it is a low signal, then the wavelength has to be more. So it increases the height of antenna. So we have to reduce the antenna height with help of modulation signal by converting this low frequency signal into high frequency signal. So what is amplitude modulation? So from the definitions and the discussions, we can conclude that it is a process of changing the amplitude of relatively high frequency carrier signal in proportion with the instantaneous value of modulating signal. So AM is used for commercial broadcasting of audio and video signal. So the major application is two-way mobile radio, audio and video broadcast. Thank you.